The message came through my earpiece. While I was still climbing the marble steps of the Grand Hall, and I almost tripped. Commander Holden, you are being called out publicly right now. The feed is live across 42 systems. I did not slow down. I could not afford to. My name is Adrian Holden, and I had been on Zhao Keung Station for less than 3 hours when the strongest warlord in the known galaxy decided to make me his target. The walls around me were taller than any building on Earth, carved from black stone that glowed faintly from within. Giant banners hung from the ceiling, each one showing the crest of a different species. Ours, the small blue and white shield of humanity, hung at the very end, the smallest banner, the newest one, the one nobody expected to stay there long. I pushed through the wide doors and stepped into the main chamber. The sound hit me first, thousands of voices, growling and hissing and clicking in languages my translator could barely keep up with. Then the sight. The chamber was a huge bowl with ringed seats rising up on all sides, packed with every species in the galactic assembly, and in the center, standing on a raised platform, was the creature that had just insulted my entire world. Warlord Gardic of the Kravish. He was 8 ft tall, covered in thick plates that grew out of his skin like living armor. His eyes were yellow and flat, his mouth, full of sharp teeth, was pulled into what I now understood was his version of a smile. Behind him stood his guards, each one larger than the last, and behind them the leaders of 6 other warrior species, Velnari, blade masters with their silver robes, Tzark and gravity walkers floating a few inches above the floor, Drell hunters with their long curved blades. Every single one of them was watching me. The soft creature arrives, Gardic said. His voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by the speakers built into the walls. I was beginning to wonder if you had run back to your muddy little world. I walked to the center platform without stopping. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at the leaders of the other species. I kept my eyes on Gardic, and I did not blink. This was the first lesson every soldier learned in basic training. When a bigger animal tries to make you feel small, you do not shrink. You stand tall, and you make them wonder if they have made a terrible mistake. I am here, Warlord, I said. My voice was steady. The translator would carry my words to every seat in the chamber. You wanted to speak, speak. The crowd made a sound like a wave, breaking. Some laughed, some hissed. Some of the older species, the ones who had been in the assembly for thousands of years, simply leaned forward to watch. Gardic took one step closer. His armored feet made the floor shake. Humanity has been given a seat at this table, he said. A seat after 40 years of space travel. 40 years. My people have fought wars longer than your entire civilization has known fire. The Velnari have studied the art of the blade for 2,000 of your generations. The Tzarkan were bending gravity before your ancestors came down from the trees. He paused. He wanted the words to land. I let them. And yet here you stand, he continued. Soft skin, weak bones, no claws, no armor, no natural weapons at all. You are prey, Commander. You are food that learned to talk, and someone somewhere made the mistake of letting you sit at a table with warriors. The chamber went quiet. Everyone was waiting to see what I would do. I could feel the sweat on the back of my neck. My heart was beating fast, but I had been in rooms worse than this. Before, I had stood in front of angry generals on 3 different planets. I had delivered bad news to men with the power to end my career and my life. This was just another room, bigger, louder. But just a room. Is there a question in there, warlord? I asked, or did you bring me down here to hear you describe me? Someone in the crowd laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Gardick's head snapped toward the noise and the laughing. Stopped. Yes, he said, turning back to me. There is a question. My question is this: why should humanity keep its seat? You have given nothing to this assembly. You have built nothing we admire. You have won no battles we respect. You are here because the old species pitied you. And pity is not a reason to share power. He raised one massive hand and gestured to the leaders behind him. I speak for the Battle Pact 7. Species 7 traditions of combat. We propose a test, a tournament. Each species sends its finest warrior. The winner stand. The losers accept their proper place. If humanity can win even one match, you keep your seat. If you lose every match, you leave the assembly quietly and you do not return. The chamber erupted. I heard shouts of approval from the warrior species. I heard gasps from the older, quieter civilizations. I heard the assembly speaker, an ancient creature with 6 eyes and a voice like wind through reeds, calling for order. Nobody listened. I stood in the center of it all, and I did the math. 7 species, 7 fighters. Each one from a culture that had spent centuries, in some cases thousands of years, training its bodies and minds for combat against us, against humans who had been in space for 40 years, whose military was still learning how to move in zero gravity, whose average soldier was 5 ft10 and weighed less than 200 lb. The odds were bad, worse than bad. They were a joke. But I also knew something that Gardick did not know, something that none of these species with their ancient traditions and their proud bloodlines had ever truly understood about us. They thought we were new to war. They were wrong. We had been at war with something or someone for every single day of our history. We had fought ice ages, we had fought plagues. We had fought larger animals, stronger animals, faster animals, and we had buried every single one of them. We had fought each other in more wars than any historian could count, and we had kept going. Every time the world tried to end us, we came back meaner, smarter, and more dangerous than before. Humanity did not have warriors. Humanity was a species of survivors who had turned into something worse. I looked up at Gardick. I let a small smile touch my lips. You want a tournament? I said. Fine. We accept. The chamber went silent again. Even Gardick seemed surprised. He had expected me to refuse. He had expected me to run. He had expected me to plead. You accept, he repeated, without consulting your people. I do not need to consult them, I said. I know what they will say. They will say yes, and they will send you exactly the kind of people you deserve to meet. The assembly speaker finally managed to make itself heard. The challenge has been accepted on both sides. The tournament will be held in 15 standard days. Each side will send 7 champions. The rules will be agreed upon in the next session. This meeting is ended. The chamber began to empty. Species moved toward the exits, chatting and arguing and making bets. I could hear the odds already being called out in the Corridors, 1,000 to 1 against humanity. 10,000 to 1, 100,000 to 1. Gardic stepped down from the platform and walked past me. He was so close I could smell him, a sharp metallic scent. That made my eyes water. "You should have run, little man," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "In 15 days, you will wish you had." He kept walking. I did not turn to watch him go. Instead, I pulled out my communicator and opened a secure line to Earth. Command, my hands were shaking slightly. But not from fear, from something else. Something colder and harder, the feeling you get when you realize the fight is coming and there is nothing you can do to stop it, and part of you does not want to stop it at all. The line connected, a familiar voice answered. "Commander, we saw the feed. What are your orders?" I took a breath. I looked up at the small blue and white banner hanging above me, so tiny compared to the others. I thought of home. I thought of every soldier I had ever served with. I thought of what we were about to do to a galaxy that had mocked us. "Send me the quiet ones," I said. "Ones we do not talk about, the ones who come home from places that do not exist. On the map, send me 7 of them and tell them to pack everything." "Understood, Commander. They will be there in 10 days. I closed the line. I looked around the empty chamber one more time. 15 days, 7 fights, the whole galaxy watching. They had no idea what they had just invited. The transport arrived 10 days later, exactly as promised. I stood on the landing platform in the cold morning air, watching the small black ship descend. Through the clouds, it had no markings, no flags, no unit number, just a shape, dark against the gray sky, settling down on the metal pad with barely a sound. That was the first thing that told me Earth Command had sent the right people. Loud ships carried soldiers, quiet ships carried something else. The ramp came down, 7 figures walked out one at a time and stopped in a line. At the bottom, they did not salute, they did not speak, they simply stood there, waiting for me to come to them. I walked down the platform and looked at each of them in turn. The first was a woman in her late 30s, small and wiry with short brown hair and dark eyes that took in everything and showed nothing. Her name was Master Sergeant Evelyn Park, 18 years in service, specialized in close quarters work and high-altitude movement. I had read her file on the way down. Most of the pages were blacked out. The second was a tall man with graying temples and a face that looked like it had been carved out of old wood. Sergeant First Class Gregory Vance. Sniper, 15 years. His record listed him as having served in 7 different operations on 4 different continents. And that was only the part the government was willing to admit. Third, a younger man, maybe 30, with a quiet face and hands that looked strong enough to crush stone. Corporal Daniel Briggs, combat medic, specialist knife work. I had seen him fight once before in a training exercise. It was not something I wanted to see again. The fourth was a woman with a long black braid and skin the color of warm copper. Specialist Nora Ellis, explosive. She could build a bomb out of kitchen supplies in under 4 minutes. She had written her own manual on it, and it was now required reading at 3 different military academies. The 5th, 6th, and 7th were a team unto themselves. Sergeant Owen Caldwell, Specialist Henry Brooks, and Corporal Lydia Fairfax. They had served together for 9 years. They moved like one person with 3 bodies. I had seen Them only in photographs, never person. The photographs had not done them justice. I stopped at the end of the line. Welcome to you all, I said. I assume you were briefed on the flight. Yes, sir, Park answered. She was the team lead. 7 matches, 7 species, rules still being finalized. The rules were agreed upon yesterday. I said, each match will take place in a changing environment. The assembly has a facility that can simulate different conditions: jungle, desert, urban ruins, low gravity, high gravity. We do not know the order in advance. Each fight continues until one side cannot continue or yields. The weapons each species brings must be shown to the judges beforehand, but combatants are not required to explain their purpose. Park nodded once. The others did not react at all. Sir, Vance said, his voice deep and calm. How much do they know about us? About humans in general, a fair amount. About you specifically, nothing. The assembly believes we will be sending our most decorated combat officers, soldiers, with medals and battle records they can look up. They have already been studying the files of our publicly known war heroes. A small smile touched Vance's mouth. It was not a nice smile. So they will be preparing for the wrong people, he said. Exactly. I led them across the transport tunnel that would take us to our quarters. As we walked, I gave them the information they needed. The enemy champions had been announced 3 days ago, and I had memorized every detail. The Kravesh were sending Krath, veteran of 200 duels, never defeated. He stood 9 ft tall and carried a weapon called a sun axe, which could cut through most armor as if it were paper. The Velnari were sending a blade master called Silverwing. She had spent 40 years training on a single mountain, refining one style of combat, and could move so fast that observers needed to slow down the recordings just to see what she had done. The Tsoran were sending Varen, a gravity walker who had killed 3 challengers in his last tournament just by bending the air around them. The Drell were sending a hunter named Thezek. He could see in the dark, track a scent across 5 miles of open country, and had teeth that could punch through bone. The other 3 species, the Kren, the Oravash, and the Maller, were all sending equally terrifying champions. Each one had a reputation that stretched across systems. Each one had spent their entire life preparing for combat. I finished the briefing. I waited for the questions, the nervous energy, the pushback. There was none. Understood, sir, Park said. That was all. We reached our quarters, a set of rooms in the human section of the station. They were small and plain. The team dropped their bags and began to unpack their gear. I noticed they did not unpack any weapons. Instead, they took out clothing, tools, small personal items, the things soldiers carry when they are planning to stay somewhere for a while and need to feel at home. Sir, Park said, turning to me, when can we see the arena? Tomorrow. They have set up a tour for the champions. You will meet your opponents face to face for the first time. Good. We would like to walk the space. Look at the lighting, the walls, the exits. There will not be any exits you can use during combat. I know, sir, but I still want to see them. That was Park, always thinking about the space around her, even when the space seemed to have no use. It was part of what made her who she was. That night I watched them prepare in a way that still surprises me when I think back on it. There was no shouting, no. Showing off, no training routines, no. Weapon cleaning, at least not where I could see it. They ate a normal meal. They talked quietly among themselves. About things I did not catch. Most of it seemed to be about family, children. Vacations they were planning, small. Normal things. At one point, Briggs the medic was telling a story about his dog, a young retriever that had recently chewed up his couch. He told it calmly with small smiles and pauses. The others laughed. Softly, you would have thought they were in a restaurant somewhere on Earth, enjoying a weekend evening instead of in a room 40 light years from home, 10 days away from the most important fights of their lives. I sat in the corner and watched them, and I realized what Gartek and the others had missed. The warrior species of the galaxy treated combat as a sacred thing, a performance, a ritual. They dressed it up in ceremony and song. They spent years preparing the body and the spirit to enter the ring. For them, a fight was an art form carried out under specific rules with specific meanings. For the people in this room, combat was just a job. It was something they had done so many times under so many different conditions that it had stopped being special. They did not need ceremonies to prepare. They did not need battle cries to find courage. They did not need to speak to their ancestors or meditate on the meaning of honor. They had already killed those things in themselves long ago, quietly, without making a show of it. What remained was a set of skills so deep that they could be performed while the person performing them was also thinking about dinner or a child's birthday or a dog that had chewed up a couch. That was what made them dangerous, not their strength, not their size, not even their training, though their training was extraordinary. It was the simple fact that they had made combat into something ordinary, and everyone else in the galaxy still thought it was magic. Late that night, after the others had gone to sleep, Park stayed behind. She found me in the small kitchen making a cup of tea. She sat across from me and spoke quietly. Sir, permission to speak freely. Always. We know what this is, she said. We know what they think is going to happen. They think they are going to put their best warriors in a ring against ours, and their warriors are going to win because they have trained longer and harder. That is what they think. They are wrong, she said, and not for the reasons most people assume. It is not because we are secretly stronger. We are not. Krath is stronger than me. Silverwing is faster than me. Varen can bend gravity and I cannot. In a fair fight they would win. So what are you going to do? She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were very tired and very calm. I am not going to give them a fair fight, she said. None of us are. We are going to give them the fight they never prepared for, the fight that no training manual has an answer to, the fight that their culture has taught them does not exist. And what fight is that? She took a sip of her tea. She put the cup down. She thought about the question for a long time. The fight where the other person does not care about winning, she said. Finally, only about making sure you lose. She stood up. She took her cup to the sink and washed it. Then she went to bed. I sat in the kitchen for another hour, staring at the wall, thinking about what she had said. Outside the window, the stars of a foreign system shone down on a station built by civilizations older than my entire species. Somewhere in that station, Garthak and His warriors were probably sleeping, confident in their ancient traditions, confident in their strength, confident that they had humanity cornered. They had no idea who was coming for them. 5 days. 5 days, and the quiet ones were going to walk into that arena, and the galaxy was going to learn the oldest lesson humanity had ever taught. The lesson we had been teaching every other creature on our own planet for 100,000 years. Being the strongest does not matter. Being the fastest does not matter. Being the biggest, the oldest, the proudest, the most decorated, none of it matters. What matters is which one of you is still standing when the fight is over. And we had always been very, very good at standing. The arena was bigger than I had imagined. I stood at the edge of the main floor the next morning and looked up at the ceiling, which was so high the light seemed small. The floor itself was wide enough to hold a small town, and everything, every inch of it could change. The assemblies. Engineers could flood the space with water, fill it with sand, grow forests inside it, or drop the temperature so low that breath turned to ice. Machines that did this were hidden in the walls. They had been running for 2,000 years. And in all that time, no human had ever walked into this place as a challenger. Today, 7 of us would. The tour was a formal event. All 7 champions from each side walked out onto the floor at the same time. The other species put on a show. Krath roared. Silverwing performed a sequence of blade moves that were so fast the air whistled. Varen lifted himself 3 ft off the ground and hovered there, arms crossed. Thesic dropped to all fours and circled the group, showing off his speed. Our team walked out together in a loose line and did nothing. Park walked to the center of the floor. She looked up at the ceiling. She looked at the walls. She turned in a slow circle, measuring distances. Vance was already walking the perimeter, counting his steps. Ellis was kneeling, touching the floor, feeling the texture. Briggs was standing still, his eyes closed, listening to the sound of the room. The 3 sergeants, Caldwell, Brooks, and Fairfax, were spread out at 3 different points, each one of them scanning a different section. None of them looked at their opponents. Not once. Krath noticed this. He stopped his roaring. He walked toward Park, his massive feet making the floor shake. He stopped about 10 ft away from her. "You do not look at me, soft one," he said. The translator carried his voice to everyone in the arena. "Are you afraid?" Park finished her circle. She took a small notebook out of her pocket and wrote something in it. Then she looked up at Krath. "No," she said, "I am working." Krath tilted his head. "Working?" "I am measuring the space," she said. "I am noting the angles of the lights, the texture of the floor, the location of the observation cameras, and the paths of any possible cover. I will look at you when I need to. Right now I do not." She went back to her notebook. Krath did not know what to do with this. He had expected fear. He had expected boasting. He had expected almost any reaction except to be treated like a piece of furniture. He stood there for several seconds, then growled and walked away. The tour lasted an hour. When it was over, the order of fights was announced. The first match would be Vance against a Karen sharpshooter named Auric. Both were distance fighters. The assembly had chosen this matchup first because they expected it to be exciting, fast, and clear. The environment would be urban ruins with variable lighting. Vance listened to the announcement. Without any expression, when it was over, he turned to me and said only one word. Good. The next evening, at exactly the hour marked by the station's central clock, the first match began. I watched from the command booth, a small room high above the arena with screens showing every angle and a live feed from sensors inside the arena floor. Park sat next to me. She was calm. She had watched the recordings of Oryx previous matches 7 times. She had a notebook full of observations. She was ready, even though it was not her fight. The lights in the arena dimmed. The floor changed. In under a minute it had transformed into a field of broken buildings, collapsed walls, rusted vehicles, and narrow alleys. The lighting was set to dusk. Long shadows stretched across the ruins. Visibility was medium at best. Oryx entered from the north. He was tall and thin with 4 arms, 2 of which held long rifles with blue energy cores. His species had evolved on a world with many predators, and their sharpshooters were famous for their ability to track movement across kilometers. He walked to the center of his starting area, placed one rifle on his back, and raised the other to his shoulder. Vance entered from the south. He was not carrying a rifle. I heard the commentators broadcasting to the rest of the galaxy pause in confusion. A sharpshooter match, a distance duel, and the human had walked in with no long gun. He carried only a sidearm and a hip holster and a small pack on his back. Park smiled very slightly. "Wait for it," she murmured. Vance moved immediately. He did not stop to survey the area. He did not look for a sniper position. He moved at a steady jog toward a collapsed building, then disappeared inside. Oryx began to scan, his eyes designed to spot the smallest movement. Swept across the ruins. He climbed onto broken wall and settled into a firing position. He was looking for a human, doing what a sharpshooter would do, climbing to high ground, finding a window, setting up a shot. He did not see any of that because Vance was not doing any of it. Vance was underneath the ruins. I watched the sensor feed. The arena floor had been built with tunnels underneath old service corridors that had been part of the facility for centuries. They were not marked on the maps given to the champions, but Vance had walked the perimeter the day before, and he had noticed something. Ventilation grates at ground level, air being drawn down, not blown out, which meant tunnels, which meant another way to move. He had brought a small tool from his pack. He had removed a grate. He had dropped into the tunnels before Oryx even arrived. Now he was moving fast and quiet, 30 ft below the arena floor, listening to the sound of Oryx's footsteps above him. He had a sensor in his hand that picked up the energy signature from Oryx rifles. He could track his opponent without being able to see him and without ever being in the line of fire. Oryx above was becoming frustrated. He scanned the ruins again and again. He saw nothing. He could not understand where the human had gone. He began to move forward, searching, his long weapon swinging from side to side. He did not look down. Vance positioned himself directly beneath Oryx's location. He climbed up a short ladder to a grate in the floor. Above him, he drew his sidearm. He waited. Oryx walked over the grate. Vance fired one straight up through the grate at point-blank range. The shot hit Oryx in the lower back, a non-lethal tranquilizer round that had been pre-approved by the judges. Auric collapsed forward surprised, unable to understand what had just happened. Before he could recover, Vance was already out of the grate, standing over him, weapon pointed at Auric's head. Yield, Vance said quietly. Auric yielded. The entire match had lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. The arena was silent. I looked at the live feeds from the other species. The Karavesh commentators were shouting in anger. The Velnari were silent, their faces unreadable. The T-Saran were rewinding the recording, watching it over and over, trying to figure out what had happened. Park nodded once. That was not a fight, one of the alien commentators said, his voice coming through my earpiece. That was an ambush. The human used the tunnels. Those tunnels were not part of the combat area. They were not excluded, Park said too. No one in particular. Check the rules. The combat area is the arena. The tunnels are under the arena. The arena includes everything within its walls. From the ceiling down to the base, it is in the rules. I had checked, she was right. The judges met for 20 minutes, then announced their decision. The match was valid. Vance had not broken any rule. The victory stood. Humanity was 1-0. The second match came 2 days later. Briggs against Silver Wing. This one I thought would be the worst. Silver Wing was not just fast, she was legendary. Her blade work had been studied by students from every warrior culture in the known galaxy. She had trained for 4 decades in a single style, refined over generations, designed to defeat anything that moved. Briggs walked into the arena with a combat knife in his belt and nothing else. The environment was a mountain temple. High altitude, thin air, cold stone floors, Silverwing's home ground, more or less. She stood at the top of a flight of stairs, her silver robes moving in the artificial wind. She held a blade in each hand. Her eyes followed Briggs as he climbed toward her. Briggs climbed slowly. He did not draw his knife. When he was halfway up the stairs, Silver Wing spoke. Her voice was high and clear. You come to me with a single small blade, she said. You come to my temple, on my ground, in my style of combat. You must want to die human. Briggs looked up at her. He said, something I will never forget. I have been dying my whole life, he said. Today is just another Tuesday. He continued up the stairs. Silver Wing waited until he was 10 ft away, then she moved. Her first strike was meant to end the fight, a single thrust so fast that the air around it shrieked. It was the opening move she had used to finish 40 opponents over her career. Briggs was not there. He had moved at the exact moment she started her strike, sliding to the side in a way that looked too simple to work. The blade passed through empty air. Silver Wing, committed to her strike, was briefly off balance. Briggs stepped forward, placed one hand on her wrist and the other on her shoulder, and did something very small and very precise with his fingers. Silver Wing dropped one of her blades. She did not understand why. She looked at her hand. The fingers were not working correctly. A nerve cluster near her wrist had been pressed in a specific way, and the signal from her brain to her hand was interrupted. Briggs was already moving to her other side. He did the same thing to her other wrist. She dropped the second blade. She tried to strike him with her elbow. He caught it, turned her arm, and she went down on her knees. He placed his knife, still sheathed, against her neck. Yield, he said. She did not answer immediately. She was still trying to understand what had happened. She had expected a clash of blades, a dance of steel, a contest of speed. She had not expected a human to simply turn off her hands. Her training had never prepared her for an opponent who did not care about the art of combat. Briggs did not want to match her style. He did not want to earn her respect. He wanted her on her knees. And he had put her there in under 30 seconds without ever drawing his weapon. She yielded. 2-0. The arena was no longer silent. It was murmuring. Something was wrong. The murmurs said something had changed. These humans were not what we were told they would be. In the command booth, Park was already writing in her notebook, preparing for the next match, preparing for everything. The other species, I now knew, had made a mistake. They had believed they were in a tournament, a test of skill, a comparison of traditions. They were not in a tournament. They were in a fight, and they did not yet understand the difference. The third match was the one that changed everything. It happened 2 days after Briggs had walked away from Silver Wing. Station was buzzing. The betting odds had shifted, though not by much. Most species still believed that humanity had been lucky twice, and that luck would run out. A few of the older civilizations had begun to watch more carefully. I saw 2 of them, the Ethari and the Morian, send observers to our quarters with polite requests to speak with our team. Park declined politely, and they went away more curious than before. The third fight was Ellis against the Zoran champion, Varen the Gravity Walker. The environment this time was a flat, open plain with scattered rocks. No cover, no buildings, no tunnels, nothing to hide behind. The sky overhead was a deep purple, simulating dusk on the Zoran home world. The gravity was set to 1.12 times Earth normal, heavy but not crushing. Varen walked out onto the plain. He did not bother walking, actually. He floated. His feet never touched the ground. He crossed the distance to the center in smooth movements, his long, gray robes trailing behind him, his pale face calm and confident. He had killed 3 opponents in his last tournament. All of them had been crushed against the walls by forces they could not see. He had never been scratched in a match. He did not carry a weapon. He did not need one. Gravity was his weapon. Ellis walked out a few moments later. She was carrying a backpack. That was it, a backpack. She wore normal combat clothing, no visible weapons, no tools, no armor, just a pack slung over her shoulder, which she swung around and placed on the ground in front of her as she reached her starting point. Varen looked at the backpack. He looked at Ellis. He seemed almost offended. "This is an insult," he said. "You come to face me with a bag." Ellis did not answer. She knelt down and opened the backpack. Varen raised one hand, and I felt the pressure in the command booth even from so far above. He had activated his gravity field. The air around Ellis began to shimmer. The rocks near her feet began to press into the ground. The pressure he was using was not lethal. Not yet, but it was a warning, a taste of what was coming. Ellis continued to work inside her backpack. Varen tilted his head. He increased the pressure. I watched Ellis's back bend slightly under the weight. She grunted, but she did not stop. She reached into the bag and pulled out 3 small Objects each about the size of a fist. They were round and dull gray with small lights blinking on them. She set them on the ground in a triangle around her. Then she pressed a button on a small controller in her other hand. The three devices activated. I do not know exactly what happened next, because most of the sensor feeds went wild for several seconds. I do know what Alice had built. She had explained it to me that morning, and I had barely believed her. The three devices were small gravity disruptors. They did not generate gravity, they disrupted it. Each one created a small local field that canceled out any external gravity manipulation within a 10 ft radius. The three of them, arranged in a triangle around her, created an overlapping zone, a bubble. Inside that bubble, Varen's powers did not work. Varen pushed harder, he poured more energy into his field. The air around Ellis should have collapsed, it did not. He tried lifting her. She did not move. He tried pressing down from above. She stood up, brushed dust off her knees, and smiled at him for the first time. "Hello, Varen," she said. "I have been looking forward to this." She stepped out of her bubble. The devices remained where she had placed them, still running. Varen tried to use his gravity on her again, and this time it worked. He could feel her. He could move her. He began to lift her into the air. Ellis reached into her pocket, pulled out a small sphere, and threw it at him. The sphere was not a weapon. It was a tracker, a small heavy ball that clung to whatever it hit and emitted a signal. It stuck to the front of Varen's robes. Ellis tapped her controller again. One of the three gravity disruptors detached from its spot on the ground. It rose into the air. It moved smoothly and quickly toward the tracker she had just stuck on Varen. When it reached him, it locked into position directly in front of his chest, the overlapping zone now centered on him, not on Ellis. Varen's gravity powers shut off. He fell hard onto the ground. The fall was not from high, but he had not landed on his feet in decades. He hit the dirt awkwardly, and I heard him grunt over the arena speakers. Ellis was already walking toward him. She walked slowly, calmly. She was not in a hurry. The gravity disruptor floated in front of Varen's chest, keeping him unable to use his one skill. She reached him. She knelt down next to him. "Yield," she said. He stared at her. "How?" he asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. "We did not know these devices existed. How do you have them?" "We built them," Ella said, 3 weeks ago. When we accepted the tournament, we pulled every recording of your previous matches. We studied your power. We figured out what it did and how it worked, and we built the tools to stop it. In 3 weeks. In 3 weeks. Varen closed his eyes. He understood. His people had spent 2,000 years refining gravity manipulation. They had considered themselves unbeatable in personal combat for most of that time. And a human woman, in less than a month, had studied their powers, understood them, and built the device that made them useless. "I yield," he said. 3-0. The arena was loud now, not cheering, not booing, arguing. Species were turning on each other. The Tsoran ambassador was on his feet, shouting at the judges, demanding that the gravity disruptors be declared illegal. The judges reviewed the rules once again. There was nothing in the rules that forbid their use. They had been approved during the pre-match inspection, though the inspector had not understood what They were. Park closed her notebook. She looked at me. 4 more, she said. The next fight was mine. I had not told the team because I had not wanted them to worry, but the assembly had insisted. Each side needed to send 7 champions. We only had 7 trained operators. If I did not fight, we would forfeit 1 match, and a forfeit counted as a loss. I could not let that happen. I was a commander, not an operator. I had been a soldier for 20 years, but I had not done the kind of close work my team did. My skills were different. I had led teams into places and brought them out again. I had made decisions that saved lives and decisions that ended them. I had killed, yes, but it had been a long time, and it had never been in a one-on-one fight against a trained warrior. My opponent was the Drell hunter, Thezik. The environment was a jungle at night. Thick trees, heavy undergrowth, almost no light, and 1,000 sounds that could hide the approach of a predator. The Drell hunted in conditions exactly like this. They were faster than humans, stronger than humans, and they could see in the dark. They attract prey across 20 light years in 7 different worlds. They did not lose. Park walked with me to the entry gate. Before the match, she put a hand on my shoulder. Commander, she said, you do not need to fight like us. You just need to fight like you. I do not know what that means. You are not a close combat specialist. You are a leader. Leaders win by making the other side make mistakes. That is your skill. Use it. He is a hunter. He does not make mistakes. Every hunter makes 1 mistake, Park said. They assume they are the hunter. That is the mistake you can use. She stepped back. The door opened. I walked into the jungle. It was dark, darker than anything I had ever been in. The simulated moonlight above the canopy gave just enough light to see shapes, but not enough to see detail. I could hear insects clicking. I could hear the wind in the leaves. I could hear my own heart loud in my ears. I carried 1 weapon, a small pistol, loaded with the non-lethal rounds permitted by the tournament. I carried 1 knife. I carried nothing else. Thezik was already in the jungle. I had entered from the south. He had entered from the north. We were about 400 m apart. He would be moving already, hunting. I did something no Drell would expect. I climbed a tree. Not a high climb, just 15 ft up into the lower branches where I could sit on a thick limb with my back to the trunk. I found a position where I could see a wide area around me in the dim light, and I settled in. And then I did nothing. This was the lesson Park had taught me. Without saying it, Thezik was a hunter. Hunters hunt prey. Prey moves. Prey panics. Prey tries to escape or hide or fight back in ways the hunter can predict. If I did what humans were expected to do, he would find me in minutes. But I was not going to be prey. I was going to be a log on a tree, a nothing, a non-event. I controlled my breathing. I slowed my heart. I did not move. For 20 minutes I did not even blink more than necessary. The jungle sounds continued around me. The insects, the wind, somewhere far away, the sound of Thezik moving through the brush. He was sweeping the area, methodical, professional. He was expecting me to run, to find cover, to attempt an ambush. From low ground, he moved in a widening spiral, covering the area where a human would reasonably hide. He did not look up. Drell evolved on a world where their prey lived on the ground. In their Entire hunting history, their food had been four-legged that ran. They had never developed the habit of looking into trees. It was a gap in their instincts, a blind spot built into the very shape of their minds by 2 million years of evolution. I sat in the tree. I waited. At minute 37, Fezzik passed directly beneath me. He was close enough that I could have dropped onto him. I did not. I let him pass. I waited for him to go. Another 20 m. Then I climbed down silently and followed him. He did not notice. The wind was blowing from him to me, so he could not smell me. His ears were focused forward, listening for prey ahead of him. His eyes scanned side to side, but he did not look behind. I stayed 4 m back. I matched his pace. I moved when he moved. I stopped when he stopped. For 8 minutes I followed the greatest hunter of his generation through jungle he had been designed for, and he did not know I was there. Then I closed the distance. I did it in 3 quick steps. My boots quiet on the forest floor. At the last step I drew my pistol. Fezzik turned, finally sensing something behind him. But it was too late. I fired once at close range, hitting him in the side of the neck with a non-lethal round. He stumbled. I kicked the back of his knee, and he went down. Before he could recover, I had my knife at his throat. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wide with confusion. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? How long have you been behind me?" 8 minutes. He closed his eyes. I saw the exact moment he understood. Humans had been prey once, a long time ago, long enough that most of us had forgotten the feeling, but the skills we had learned becoming apex predators had never left us. We knew how to stalk. We knew how to wait. We knew how to become invisible by becoming nothing, by being so still and quiet that we slipped beneath the attention of even the best senses. The Drell had spent 1,000 generations being the best hunters on their world. We had spent 100,000 generations being the best hunters on ours. The math was not close. "I yield," Fezzik whispered. 4 for 0. I walked out of the jungle to see Park waiting at the gate. She did not smile, but she nodded, which from her was the highest praise I had ever received. 3 matches remained, and whatever had been holding the other species together, whatever had been keeping their alliance from cracking, I could feel it beginning to break. The assembly hall was in open rebellion. By the time the 5th match was scheduled, I walked into the arena complex that morning, and I could feel it in the air. The warrior species who had stood together just a week before were now arguing in public. The Kravesh blamed the Tsaran for being weak. The Tsaran blamed the Drell for allowing a human to stalk him. The Drell blamed the Kravesh for starting the tournament in the first place. The Velnari said nothing, but Silverwing had left the station the night before her formal statement was due, and nobody knew where she had gone. The older species, the ones who had sat quietly for so long, were now talking to us, not just observing, talking. The Ethari ambassador came to our quarters, and this time we let her in. She was small, with 6 thin limbs and eyes the color of old glass. She sat across from Park and spoke for an hour. Mostly she asked questions. A few of them were military, but most were not. She wanted to know about Earth, about our history, about the wars we had survived, about how a species so young could produce people like the ones she had been watching for the last 10 days. Park answered her questions honestly. She did not boast, she did not downplay. She spoke the truth as she knew it. Humans, she said, had spent their whole history fighting things that should have killed them. Diseases that had wiped out half of us more than once. Ice ages that had nearly ended our line. Wars we had started against ourselves, which had almost been worse than any of it. We had survived all of it not because we were strong, but because we refused to stop. That was the only quality we had in greater supply than any other species, the refusal to stop. The Ethari listened. When Park was finished, the ambassador was quiet for a long time. The battle pact believed they were testing your strength, she said. Finally, they did not realize they were testing something else. What was that? Park asked. Your patience, your creativity, your willingness to approach the problem from outside the rules they thought applied. These are the qualities that win long wars, not the qualities that win single duels. The battle pact has never fought a long war, they have only fought duels, duels they have always won, because they have made the rules. She stood up, she bowed once, a gesture of respect rarely given to new members of the assembly. I wish you well in the remaining matches, human, and I believe my people will be watching your species with much closer attention from now on. She left. The fifth match was Caldwell against the Oravesh champion. The Oravesh were a massive species, 7 ft tall, covered in armor plating that grew and overlapping rose like the scales of a reptile. Their champion was called Grand Blade Marak, and he was the oldest competitor in the tournament, 300 years old, a veteran of more duels than anyone could count. He was slower than some of the others, but stronger, and he had survived every fight he had ever been in. By being the last one standing, he did not mind taking hits, he did not mind pain. He simply kept coming forward until his opponent fell. The environment was a frozen lake, flat ice stretching for 500 m in every direction with a thin layer of snow on top. Cold wind, no cover, no obstacles, nothing but open space. It was meant to favor Morak. His armor would protect him from the cold. His mass would give him stability on the ice. Caldwell, lighter and unarmored, would struggle to move, struggle to stay warm, and struggle to find any way to fight a slower but far stronger opponent on an open plain. Caldwell walked out onto the ice wearing boots I had not seen before. They were a strange design with small metal plates on the bottom. Morak walked out from the far side. And GT, snorts. And GT. He carried a massive two-handed weapon that he swung in a slow arc to warm his arms. He looked across the ice at Caldwell, who was a small dark figure against the white. Marek began to walk forward. Caldwell did not move. Marek walked for 2 full minutes before he reached the halfway point. Caldwell stood and watched. His hands were at his sides. He did not draw a weapon. He did not change his stance. Marek reached the 3/4 point. He was close enough now that his footsteps made the ice shake slightly. Under Caldwell's feet, he raised his weapon. Caldwell tapped one foot on the ice. Nothing seemed to happen. Marek took another step, then another. The ice broke. Not in one place, in many places. Entire section around Marek in a circle, about 10 m wide, cracked at the same time. Caldwell's boots had not been ordinary boots. They had contained small Sonic devices that, when activated, sent pulses of sound into the ice. The pulses had traveled through the frozen surface out from where Caldwell stood to a specific area about 60 m away. They had weakened the ice in a pattern Caldwell had calculated the night before, using data from the arena's environmental systems that his team had accessed through methods I did not want to know about. Marek fell into the water. He was wearing heavy armor. He sank fast. The water beneath the ice was near freezing and deep, and the hole he had made was narrow enough that his massive body could not easily climb back out. He struggled, he thrashed, he tried to grab the edges of the ice, but his armored fingers could not grip the smooth surface. Caldwell walked across the ice calmly, skirting the broken area until he reached a point just above where Marek was struggling. He knelt down. He extended one hand. "Yield," he said, "and I pull you out. Keep fighting and you drown." Marek looked up at him. Marek had been fighting for 300 years. He had been in 1,000 duels. He had never in all that time asked for mercy from anyone. But he was an old warrior, and old warriors know the difference between honor and foolishness. Honor was fighting a fair fight. Foolishness was dying on a frozen lake because you could not swim. "I yield," he said. Caldwell pulled him out. 5-0. The sixth match came 2 days later. Brooks against the Mauler champion, a creature called Vexen. The Mauler were a small species, barely 4 ft tall, but they had hands that could secrete a paralytic poison on contact. And they moved faster than almost anything in the galaxy. Vexen was the quickest warrior in the tournament, capable of closing a 10 m gap in under a second and delivering a touch that would shut down a human nervous system for hours. The environment was a desert under full sunlight, hot sand, bright light, wide open spaces, perfect for Vexen, who could use the heat to blur his outline and the sand to hide his tracks. Brooks walked into the arena carrying a large cloth in his hands. That was all, a cloth. Vexen, at the far end of the arena, laughed, a high clicking sound that echoed across the sand. "A towel, human," he called. "Have you come to surrender already? Do you plan to wave a white flag at me?" Brooks did not answer. He unfolded the cloth as he walked. It was larger than it had looked, a sheet really, dyed a pale gray color that matched the sand. He held it out in front of him as he walked. Vexen began to move. He darted left, then right, then forward. Not in a straight line, but in a complex pattern designed to confuse his opponent. He closed the distance in a series of jumps, each one a blur. Brooks released the cloth at the exact moment Vexen reached the 10 m mark. The wind in the arena caught it. The cloth opened in the air, spreading wide. A thin gray cloud between Brooks and Vexen. Vexen, moving fast, could not stop in time. He ran into the cloth. The cloth was not ordinary fabric. It had been coated that morning with a fine powder that our team had developed based on analysis of Mauler biology. The powder was harmless to humans, but on Mauler skin it triggered a specific chemical reaction, not lethal, not even harmful in the long run, but it shut down the glands in their hands that produced the paralytic poison. For about 6 hours, a Mauler touched by the powder could not use their primary weapon. Vexen hit the cloth at full speed. He tangled in it. He fell. He rolled. He came up, clawing at his face, at his hands, realizing immediately what had happened. He tried to shake off the powder. It was already too late. The reaction had started the moment it touched his skin. He still had his speed. He still had his training. He charged Brooks anyway. Brooks was ready, without the poison. Vexen was just a small, fast fighter. And Brooks was a close combat specialist. With 9 years of practice, Brooks caught Vexen's first strike, redirected his momentum, and had him pinned face down on the sand in under 5 seconds. Yield, Brooks asked. Vexen hissed, but he yielded. 6-0. The assembly was now in complete confusion. Species that had been part of the battle pact were formally withdrawing their support. The Kravish were isolated, their allies abandoning them one by one. Betting markets had shut down because the odds were shifting too fast for anyone to keep up. The galaxy had tuned in to watch humanity be humiliated, and instead was watching something no one could have predicted: a systematic destruction of the greatest warrior traditions in known space, performed by 7 quiet humans using methods that nobody had thought possible. And we had one match left. Corporal Fairfax against Kralith, the Kravish champion, the 9FT tall warrior, with the Sun Axe who had won 200 duels without a loss. This was the match Gardeck had demanded. This was the match he had been pushing. For since the beginning, he had wanted Kralith to be the one to finally end humanity's run. He had wanted his champion to redeem the honor of the battle pact. The environment would be a stone arena, circular with no cover, traditional Kravish combat ground, a place where Kralith had fought many times before and had never been defeated. The rules for this match, at Gardeck's demand, were different from the others. Full contact, lethal force permitted. With medical intervention ready, the first champion to fall and fail to rise would lose. If the fallen champion could be revived, they would be returned to their people. If they could not, the match would be declared concluded by their end. Fairfax accepted these terms without discussion. The night before the match, I sat with her in the common room. She was cleaning a knife, not the knife she would use tomorrow, just an old pocket knife she carried everywhere. She cleaned it carefully, moved the blade out and in, tested the spring, cleaned it again. "Are you ready?" I asked. She thought about the question. She was a small woman, 54, maybe 130 lb. Tomorrow she would fight a warrior 3 times her size with a weapon that could cut her in half. "I have been ready for this fight my whole life," she said. "I just did not know it would be this one." "What do you mean?" She closed the knife. She put it on the table. "When I was 8 years old, a man tried to break into our house. My father was at work. My mother was asleep. I was the only one awake. I heard him at the back door. I did not run. I did not hide. I went and got my father's old hunting knife, and I stood in the kitchen waiting for him." "Did he come in?" "He did. He was much bigger than me. He had a crowbar. I was 8. I should have died, but I did not run, and I did not scream. And when he came into the kitchen, I was already moving. I hit him. Before he saw me, I kept hitting him. He ran. He left a trail of blood to his car. The police caught him a week later because he went to a hospital to get stitches." She picked up the pocket knife again, opened it. "That was when I learned what my life was going to be. I was not going to be big. I was not going to be strong. I was Never going to be the scariest person. The room just by looking at me. But I was going to be the last person standing. Every single time, because when the fight comes, I do not run, I do not hide, I go toward it. That is the only thing I have ever been good at. She closed the knife again. Tomorrow, I am going to walk into that arena with Krath. He is going to expect me to run because everyone he has ever fought has tried to run at some point. I am not going to run, I am going to walk toward him, and he is not going to know what to do with that, because in 200 fights no one has ever just walked at him, not a single one. I looked at her for a long time. You think that will be enough? She smiled. It was the first time I had seen her smile since she had arrived on the station. No, she said, but it is a start. The rest we will figure out as we go. She stood up, she went to bed. I sat alone in the common room for a long time thinking about what she had said. The next day she would walk into the arena with Krath, and the whole galaxy would watch. And for the first time in my career, I realized that I was not afraid for her. I was afraid for him because Krath had won 200 duels against warriors, and warriors play by rules. He was about to meet a woman who had never played by rules in her life, and he had no idea that the game he was about to play was already over. The final match began at dawn. Krath walked into the arena first. He was even more massive than I remembered. His armor had been polished, his sun axe had been sharpened. He roared as he entered, and the Kravish section of the crowd roared back. This was their moment, their champion, their last chance to restore the honor of the battle pact. Fairfax walked in a minute later. She wore simple combat clothing. She carried a combat knife on her hip, and in her right hand a small tool that looked like a metal rod with two prongs at the end. She did not speak, she did not acknowledge the crowd. She walked to her starting position and stood, hands at her sides, looking at Krath across the 40 m of stone that separated them. The bell rang. Krath moved first. He charged as he always did, using his size and weight to overwhelm opponents in the opening moments. His sun axe came up over his head, glowing bright orange, ready to cut through whatever Fairfax tried to block with. Fairfax did not try to block, she did not try to dodge, she walked forward. Krath reached her, he swung the axe. At the last moment Fairfax stepped inside his reach. The axe went over her head, its edge passed within inches of her skull. She was too close for him to use the weapon properly now. He tried to bring the handle around to smash her with the back of it. She was already moving again. She pressed the metal rod with the two prongs against his side. It was a simple device, not a weapon from any warrior culture. It was an electrical tool like the ones used on Earth to subdue dangerous animals. Stun device, basic technology centuries old on our planet. Krath's armor was thick. It was built to stop blades and arrows and energy weapons. It was not built to stop electricity, because no Kravish warrior had ever fought an opponent who would be low enough to use such a thing. 50,000 V ran through his body. He staggered, he dropped the axe, his massive legs buckled. He did not fall. Not completely, but he went to one knee, shaking, trying to make his body work again. Fairfax did not stop. She drove her shoulder into his chest. He fell backward. She was on top of him before He could roll away. She put her knife against his neck. Yield, she said. Krath was still shaking from the shock. His yellow eyes were wide. He could not believe what had happened. In his mind, this was impossible. A human, a small, soft human, had walked directly at him and stopped his charge with a tool that was not even a weapon by his people's standards. He tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak. You are not a warrior, he said. Fairfax did not move the knife. No, she said, I am not a warrior. I am a person who survived, and I brought a tool to solve a problem. You were the problem. The problem is solved. This is not honor. This is not combat. This is what happens when you pick a fight with people who have been fighting to stay alive for 100,000 years. You thought you were bringing your best to a ceremony. We brought our best to a job. The job is over. Yield. Krath stared at her. In his face I saw something I had not seen in any of the other fights. I saw a kind of grief. The grief of a warrior who had just realized that everything he had ever been taught was only a small part of a much larger truth. The truth was that combat was not about honor or skill or tradition or any of the things his culture had built its identity upon. Combat was about solving the problem of a dangerous opponent by any means necessary and then going home. Humans had understood this for a long time. He was only understanding it now. I yield, he whispered. 7-0. The arena was silent. Then from the older sections of the crowd, from the Ithari and the Morian, and the other ancient species who had watched the entire tournament in thoughtful silence, there came a sound. A slow, deep sound. It took me a moment to recognize it. They were clapping. Not for Krath, not for the Kravish, for us. Fairfax stood up. She helped Krath to his feet, which surprised him. She put her knife back in its holster. She walked out of the arena without looking back. I met her at the gate. I did not know what to say. She looked up at me. She was small and tired, and her eyes were the eyes of someone who had done something necessary and was ready to go home. Is it over? She asked. It is over. She nodded. She walked past me toward our quarters. An hour later, Gardeck requested a private meeting. He came to our quarters, alone without guards, and sat in our common room while our team stood around him. He was different now. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something older and quieter, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. I was wrong, he said, about humanity, about the tournament, about what I believed was true in this galaxy. We did not answer. He did not seem to need an answer. You will keep your seat in the assembly, he continued. I will not challenge it again. I will instead ask for something else. I will ask that my people be allowed to learn from yours. We have been strong for a long time. We have never been wise. I think perhaps we have confused the two. Park stepped forward. We will teach you what we can, she said, but you should know there is nothing special about the 7 of us. Every human has the capacity we have shown. We do not train soldiers to win duels. We train them to stay alive. That is a different skill. It is a skill any species can learn if they are willing to set aside what they think they already know. Gardeck nodded. He stood up. He bowed to her. It was, I later learned, the first time a Katheric warlord had ever bowed to a being not of his own species. The recording of that bow would travel across the galaxy in the following weeks, and it would change more than the tournament ever could have. He left. We sat in the common room for a long time after he was gone. The team was quiet. Ellis was the first to speak. I could use a shower, she said, and maybe a long sleep. Same, said Vance. Same, said Briggs. Park smiled just slightly. She looked at me. Sir, she said, I think we are done here. We went home the next day. I have thought about that tournament many times in the years since. I have thought about what we proved and what we did not prove and what the galaxy took from it. The assembly has grown since then. Humanity has a larger seat now. 3 of the warrior species who had been part of the battle pact have signed formal treaties with Earth. Others have requested training exchanges, cultural exchanges, technology exchanges. But the thing I remember most is a conversation I had with Park on the flight home. We were sitting in the transport, looking out the window at the stars, and I asked her a question I had been holding since the tournament ended. Why did we win? I asked. Really? No speeches, no philosophy. What was the actual reason? She was quiet for a while. She watched the stars move past. Because they thought they were fighting warriors, she said, and we are not warriors. We never have been. Then what are we? She thought about it. We are the thing that stays alive, she said. That is all. That is everything. 100,000 years ago, our ancestors were small and soft and slow. Everything that lived near us was bigger, faster, stronger, meaner. We should have died in the first 10,000 years. We did not. We stayed alive. We kept staying alive. We learned how to do it better and better until the skill of staying alive became the thing we were best at. Not fighting, not killing, just staying alive by whatever means it took, for as long as it took, against whatever tried to stop us. She turned to me. The galaxy has warriors. It has had warriors for millions of years. Warriors fight for honor, for tradition, for glory. Warriors snorts lose sometimes. They accept loss as part of the system. Warriors can be reasoned with, predicted, defeated, because they play by rules they themselves believe in. That is their weakness. And us, we are not warriors, she said. We are survivors. We do not fight for honor. We do not fight for glory. We do not even fight for victory. We fight because the alternative is to stop being, and we will never stop being. Not for anyone, not for anything. We will use any tool, break any rule, ignore any tradition to stay alive. That is what we are. That is what they did not understand about us. That is why they could not beat us, and why no one can, as long as we remember what we are. She turned back to the window. The stars kept moving. Somewhere among them, a planet was waiting for us, a planet with 7 billion people who had never heard of Joker Station, never heard of the Battle Pact, never known about the tournament that had just changed the balance of the entire Galactic Assembly. But they knew in their bones the thing Park had just said, every single one of them, because it was the same thing that had kept their ancestors alive through plagues and ice and famine and every form of war. The simple, stubborn, ordinary miracle of refusing to stop. We were going home, and for the first time in a long time, the galaxy was going to have to make room for us.